It was 1986. Yeah? And we had a book. At that time, even in computer science, we used books. And the book said, well, if we can get this right, we can build a general problem solver. And my best friends at studies and I, we said, we're going to program the best problem solver, idealistic as we were, and we're going to solve all humanity's problems. Well, it took some time. Maybe now, in a few years, we can get there. So that's why I'm really excited to be here. And I would like to ask you some questions. I think one of the things that popped up a number of times is trust in LLM. I was wondering, of course, what we saw is you could have, let's say, augmented intelligence, so have a person check whether the context is right or whether the answer is right. But I've also seen some developments like TrueLens and other technologies that can help you to check whether a RAG delivers the right answers. Are you using those kind of technologies?
Yeah, so a couple of RAG solutions that we have implemented, right? We have a maker-checker sort of an implementation in the sense that maker is the AI and checker is a human, so that we have 50% or more than that resolved by the AI. And we are learning from the maker implementation as to how many of these responses provided by LLM are right, and then where it could be improved, and sort of devising a feedback system. Right now it is semi-automated and it passes through a human checker implementation. So we have like a bifurcated maker checker implementation to handle some of these. And over time, as we kind of get more understanding about how accurate these responses are, we want to slowly unleash these systems.
But it needs you to use people to check. It's not like technologies like TrueLens or something like that.
So an interesting paper that came out in October and implemented takes a slightly different black box approach, and they found that fairly.
We don't hear you, sorry.
Hello. Yep. Okay. All right. There we go. So a paper that came out in around October 2023, and takes a novel approach, a black box approach, which normally I'm not a big fan of, but this one made sense, and when I tried it, it's yielded very good results. And what it does is it again goes into the way that LLMs work. So here we're talking about part of it is hallucination, which means the LLM has the ability sometimes to make up stuff. In fact, if you ask, for example, once I did, give me the top 100 papers for X and Y research, let's say AI research, out of the 100, it's very likely, depending on certain settings, that anywhere from 2 to 5 to 10 may be completely made up authors and papers. And what they did was understood in a novel way that it tends to give these answers when the probability distributions are fairly low. And the way to then detect if it's a hallucination or not is to do a small perturbation on your input. Right? So instead of 100, you'll say 101 papers. And now the hallucination papers will change or disappear. Whereas the ones that are true are probably going to stay still. Right? We have had good results with this, which we are already implementing in certain projects. Having said that, at the end of the day, we still want a human at least for a little while to still be consistent results for at least a few months.
Yeah, I want to add to that. Thanks, Rohit, because when you have an LLM and it gives a wrong answer, there are certain types of wrong answers. So hallucinations is one of them, so then they completely make up an answer. But for RAG systems, another source of inaccuracies is that it just doesn't retrieve the right documents to answer the question. So you have to look at the system in which part does the error occur. Is it from the LLM itself? Is my retrieval process wrong? Do I retrieve the right documents? Is the answer actual in the documents that I'm retrieving? So there is some monitoring on that side as well that needs to be done in order to check whether the answers are correct.
if there's any questions in the room, please put your hands. Then I think another question that I would like to talk about is what is the biggest challenge to get this working? Is that like getting people that have the right capabilities? Is that technology? Is that data? Can you talk a bit about that? Maybe Bala, you first?
I hope and think everyone will give different answers to this one. The biggest challenge, I can't pinpoint one. Perhaps the one thing is that I see very often is the misunderstanding that LLMs can deliver everything from the business side, right? So essentially requirements get dumped on the technology departments or analytics departments, and they are simply expected to deliver. But a lot of this work requires, what was just talked about, right? So the working on the output and checking, having adequate controls in place and so on. And this requires business expertise, right? So skills like what these guys bring, right? The data science kind of skills need to be sort of honed and developed on the business side, and this is what seems to be like a bigger challenge.
Yeah, I can add to that as well. So one of the problems that is also quite common when you are applying AI to stuff is that the AI, the system that you're implementing, is held to a much higher standard than the employees that were doing that process beforehand. So, for example, when you read about a car crash by an automated vehicle, then all automated vehicles are automatically written off as a solution because there's one crash. But even if there are 100,000 crashes of human drivers in the same day, so why do we keep these different standards? So if I have a fraud module, fraud detection module that can detect fraud, a bit better than the average person, why do we have it to a degree that is not even human-like, right? So, and then we have all these regulations that go into why we can't use this model, but can use a human. And so this is also one of the hurdles we have to face.
So that's both business expectations that are higher than technology can deliver, but good enough if you compare it to people, or better than people. Any additions on this side?
Yeah, I feel we as humans have invented something larger than ourselves in terms of this LLMs, and all of us are figuring it out. I don't think anybody has figured it out completely as to how this needs to be done. So I think we need to fail faster, do more iterations, do quick POCs, and then go through this thing together. For example, the technology folks could say, hey, I have a cool solution for this use case, but the business folks might not be ready. But how do you go and solve this thing together, right? I think there needs to be a synergy established. And to do that, I think we need to do POCs and then demonstrate, hey, this is how it needs to be done. And educate together and move together in tandem. We cannot move in silos, I feel. I think that for me seems like a biggest challenge, and that needs to be overcome.
For me, it's been the impedance between the domain experts and the technologists. Developing LLMs requires a high degree of domain expertise as well as technical expertise. And although I guess it's unreasonable to expect that one person can have that, when the bridge is too far apart, it makes it very difficult, or rather it takes much longer to achieve the same thing. That's one. Second, I will second what Bala said about expectations. Just to give an example, we're developing an LLM system for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of a certain country. And one of them actually said, oh, after this is developed, we would expect it to advise us on negotiations. Okay. So there's a huge gulf between expectations and reality that does need to be addressed.
Thank you. Yes, and be sure that a car that automatically drives is way better than I drive. With no amount of accents. A question over there.
Thanks very much. We've heard a lot this morning from the panel. Some very smart people working on some great productivity gains and some really smart stuff. But all of you work in an environment where there's legal and moral obligations. But are you concerned about people who have access to this technology who don't have the same legal and moral obligations, and what threats they might mean for your organizations?
Very much so. That is actually bread and butter for me, in the sense that, as I demonstrated, LLMs have become very ubiquitous right now. Just in the past 1 year, we have more than 10 LLMs which have come up, open source, etc. Somebody with modest amount of resources can command these and have very little technical knowledge to actually achieve certain objectives. At the government level, it's even more so, but frankly, beyond the scope of my reasoning. There are regulations coming up in Europe, Canada, Korea, which really restrict the use of some of these technologies, at least make certain obligations. This may not be the same, this may not be applicable to certain governments who choose not to follow this. But like in any technology, I think proper regulation and law enforcement does need to catch up so that misuse can be limited.
Absolutely, right? So it needs to be there. And this is also the reason, right? So since morning we have seen so many cases that are being implemented, that have been tested as POCs, products and so on, but not too many at least, have been products that are directly offered to the end users, right? So most of them have been internal use cases and so on. It's for the very reason that we're talking
about. There are certain types of fraud, like Rohit mentioned, that are much more accessible. But I think, well, let me preface this with I'm not in cybersecurity. So, but I think those same threats were there beforehand as well. So the very involved cybercriminal could already do this. So now it has become much more accessible. What is new is that there are new types of risks that weren't possible before. Like CEO fraud. You can create a video call with your CEO that is completely deepfaked. And those are new kinds of threats that have become much more accessible that weren't possible before in this way. And a couple of weeks ago there was this huge scam with millions of dollars that were transactions because of a deepfake video call. And this is what you have to train your employees on to really recognize these kinds of settings and always verify and ask, verify that the person you're talking to is actually the person you're talking to and not just a deepfake.
Are you already training them?
Yes, we provide trainings at Volksbank to prevent cybercrime. Yeah.
I would actually like to give one example. Like a couple of decades ago, when ATM was first invented, right? A lot of people thought, hey, this is some threat to humanity, and it could lead to a lot of catastrophes. But over time, I think we failed, and then we learned what can be done better there. I think a similar situation is currently happening as well with generative AI. Absolutely, I think we need to have all the regulations and risk controls in place. One way to handle that is to give the right access of control to different folks in the banks, right? Like probably the AI folks could have the highest level of access, and then you basically provide access based on the roles that they're doing, and then how much of this technology should be relevant in their day-to-day jobs and stuff like that. Also, another aspect is whatever level of access you give, there's still one or the other thing that could go wrong. In those cases, what can be done? Right? I think all of us need to get educated. The right amount of training is very much important, so that we are aware of any some sort of catastrophe that could happen, and if we are aware of it. I think all of us should have some sort of a training process that we should undergo of what sort of threats could occur because of this. But like I said, I think we'll fail, but we need to fail faster and then learn from it and then get better at it.
Thank you. Another question? No? Then I would like to go to the next question. That is, okay, we make these really nice AI applications, and then they have to go into production and stay into production, which has its own challenges. I talked with a client last week, one of the pilot clients of OpenAI, and they are a publisher. And for example, they had a review mechanism for articles, where they needed 8 questions to be answered. And because that took a long time, one of the employees cut it into 8 different prompts, delivering the CTO an extra bill of 250,000 euros that week, because that was 8 times the number of prompts instead of the original one. And another thing is that the technology keeps on moving ahead. So, like when they were reviewing articles half a year ago, they could put in 8K per article, but now, and they would cut up the articles. Isn't needed anymore because it can now consume larger context. So this is, I think, something that we need to take care of. Once we have these models in production, we need people that are knowledgeable, but not only knowledgeable, also to keep up with what's going on. How do you do that, for example, Steve? Can you tell something about that?
I can try at least. So to preface this, we don't have any LLMs in production right now, so we don't face this problem currently. But we do have very knowledgeable people in our teams, and this is a problem that everyone is facing. And cloud costs are not a private issue to LLMs. So anyone that has a private cloud provider can confirm that those costs can rise up very quickly and need to be monitored. And the same is true for generative AI applications. Well, if you see how many times OpenAI is updating its model, well, if you are on Azure, for example, you automatically can subscribe to these updates. So you can defer this to your vendor, actually. This is one avenue we're looking at.
Maybe you have to rewrite your application.
Well, you don't have to rewrite your application if the interface stays the same. So it's basically a software engineering problem. If the model expects its queries in the same way that it did before, but it has a different answering mechanism, but it provides the answers in the same way as before, you just switch out the model. So that's more of an engineering problem. So that's how I look at it at the moment.
Probably just a couple of things, right? So we have a few LLMs in production that most importantly use. Yes, I mean, we have some sort of negotiating with decent licensing model with the provider, which goes on to say, hey, we are still in the testing phase. Don't charge us for API at all, because this is right? So this is where the cost is coming. And we are still testing it in smaller teams. Also, they are in production. The conference one here, it is already in production. So this is one model. And coming to the point of the overall AI literacy, right? So this is something that where we have been running a lot of shows, presentations, in terms of what needs to be done, what can be done, and so on. And just so people are aware of what they can expect. And so we're also organizing, for example, hackathons and so on, where business can work very closely with the teams from analytics departments. They come together and try to understand and solve that common problem together.
Thank you. Any questions there?
So the first problem in terms of cost, I don't see it as that much of a problem in the sense that we went through similar things during cloud and data warehouse, as things kind of scale. And there are standardized methodologies in terms of putting alerts, etc. That you can kind of at least get yourself aware during pre-production and get yourself prepared. My concern on especially production environment is more everything else associated around the core that people are not considering. Definitely when model upgrades happen, you need to have proper test cases because they may not give the same results again. 3.5 before will probably not give the result. Didn't in many cases, and as with it. So especially for consumer-facing applications, it's not just about accuracy, it's about stability of the output. You need to be really careful about that. There's also the whole thing, as I've shown you, about monitoring, etc., and the costs associated with that. So it's an enterprise system, it's not something prototype, and there are a lot of costs around the LLM, not just the core LLM that needs to be used.
I would like to add just one point regarding that. I think to stay relevant in terms of LLMs, right? Instead of what to pick up and implement, I think it's equally important what to not pick up. For example, the example that you gave about context length, right? Before it was 128K tokens or something, it's always increasing, right? But is it relevant for my use case? Or should I pick it up or should I let it go? I think choosing what not to do is quite important to stay relevant, because there's so much of noise coming up. And also, whatever we learn today is getting obsolete in 3 weeks. So I think it's very important to let go a lot of things as well.
Well, thank you. That finalizes the panel. Thanks for all the speakers.